Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for the Oregon Duck fans coming out of the recruiting trail, and the Oregon Ducks commitment sweatshirt. It comes back on. Four-star offensive lineman Douglas Utu flipping his commitment from Tennessee to this Oregon Ducks program. Even the Tennessee fans know I was a massive fan of Douglas Utu when he committed to Tennessee over the summer. If I were to sell the Oregon fans on Douglas Utu in just about 20 seconds, you're getting one of the more polished offensive linemen that you see across the country. This kid's a 4-year starter at Bishop Gorman, one of the best high school programs across the country. But on top of that, this kid has played guard and tackle, and I think gives you that kind of offensive line versatility that you're looking for at the next level as well. I think he has the ideal frame and athleticism to play offensive tackle, but this kid's a road grader and he's violent in a phone booth if you want to play him at guard as well. But I think most importantly, you'd want to make sure you don't miss on offensive linemen. And if there were a top 5 offensive line list in this 2025 class where I look at these offensive linemen and say, there ain't no way that this kid's missing as a prospect, Douglas Utu would probably be on top of that list. Extremely polished, has played a ton of football during his high school career. And I think Dan Lanning knows. Like, you want to consistently compete at the highest level, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country. You got to make sure you're getting your offensive linemen from the high school ranks. We see a lot of programs try to build their offensive line through the transfer portal. That is clearly becoming a way to not effectively build an offensive line. So you want to make sure you're getting these guys into your program from the high school ranks, getting them developed. You're seeing Dan Lanning put a strong emphasis on recruiting the offensive line out of the high school ranks, joining Zaire Addison, one of my favorite tackles from the state of Florida, Alai Kalivulanu. I think I said that name right. Douglas Utu's teammate at Bishop Gorman, and also Dimitri Manning. That's 4 blue chippers on the offensive line in this 2025 cycle. Want to get a little bit into Douglas Utu, take a look at the film, talk about what he brings to this Oregon offensive line. Now, before we get into it, as always, massive shout out to the Oregon Duck fans. It's been a blast talking this program, whether we're talking about 2024, whether we're talking about the recruiting trail. Y'all continue to show a ton of love to the boys. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with how the recruiting services value Douglas Utu, where you look at 24/7 Sports has him as the 101st national prospect. According to the composite, he's 69th. ESPN, 13th best national player in the country, a 5-star according to ESPN. You look at Rivals, the 12th best player nationally, a 5-star according to Rivals. There are some recruiting services that think Douglas Utu is one of the best players in the country. And quite frankly, I agree. Like, you dive into the film, even going back to some of the sophomore and junior tape, this kid, the combination of the ideal measurements, you know what I mean? You look at this kid and say, all right, that's what a tackle should look like at the college football level. But I think more importantly, what you see on the film, the blend of just being an absolute technician at the position, but also marrying that with athleticism and power, very versatile in terms of how you want to deploy Douglas Utu. This kid is a box checker. And again, I think what he adds to this Oregon offensive line is, a prospect that I don't really think can miss. Like, you look at this kid, it is really hard to see him not being a multi-year starter for this Oregon Ducks program over the next couple of years. You dive into the film a little bit, and again, it's all over the film. It's so clear to me why ESPN and Rivals have this kid as a 5-star, because you dive into the film and say, one, he gives you that versatility, plays tackle, plays guard, but more importantly, there's just not really anything that Douglas Utu doesn't do at a high level. You want him to run block. He moves bodies off the line of scrimmage exceptionally well, plays with that ideal violence that you're looking for. In pass protection, the feet are awfully quiet. The coordination is certainly there. I think that he would probably be a better guard just because of how violent he is at the point of attack. And you look at Douglas Utu, you almost want to put him in a phone booth and let him just impose his will. That being said, this kid's a phenomenal athlete. And if you have the ability to get a phenomenal athlete at the tackle spot, you kind of want to do that as well. And this is the ideal play right here, right? Getting to the second level, inside, you keeping your hands inside, really, really strong when he's engaged, and just putting this kid into the dirt. That is exactly what it should look like. And you kind of see that all over the film. Like there's not much just relying on athleticism. You look at him in pass protection, just super, super comfortable with those feet. He's nasty to finish off blocks. If you're an Oregon fan, I think you're really happy with this commitment. And you look at the offensive line class. And again, I think the large conversation about Oregon in this cycle is what you have at wide receiver, right? 5-star wide receiver Dallas Wilson, 5-star wide receiver DeCorey Moore. Those guys, we love them, right? We've talked about them plenty of times, but you look at the offensive line clash. Zaire Addison, 6'5", 290. This kid moves like a tight end. I think he's another guy that could play on the inside, but also could play tackle. You scroll down to Eli Kalivanalu, his teammate at Bishop Gorman. I mean, again, you're just getting two offensive linemen that are extremely polished, two guys that are kind of bona fide starters at the Power 5 level. You take a flyer on a guy like Dimitri Manning, who I kind of talked about it, kind of like McRoy from the 2023 or 2024 class. That is, he might need a little bit more work. He's probably not as polished as guys like Douglas Utu coming in, but there's a very high ceiling for a guy that's 6'7", 350 pounds. If you're Oregon, like you're building this program the right way. Like you are getting your line of scrimmage players largely from the high school ranks. You're supplementing this roster in the transfer portal. It's not like Oregon went out and grabbed 30 guys in the transfer portal. It was 15 guys with which was targeted to make this roster better. When you recruit at the level that Dan Lanning's doing at the high school ranks, you don't have to get desperate in the transfer portal. You can kind of have your pickings in terms of what guys you think are going to add value to your roster. But you don't have to get desperate and just add a ton of names. That's kind of how you're seeing Dan Lanning manage it. Now, if there was one kind of interesting name for the Oregon fans to just keep tabs on over the next couple of weeks, it's 5-star tight end Lincoln Cure. It's been kind of a wild ride for Oregon recruiting the tight end position, right? You had Deshaun Brown committed. He flips to Tennessee. You're seeing Oregon and Tennessee go at it on the recruiting trail. Lincoln Cure was always that other target that Oregon was looking for. And when Deshaun Brown committed to Oregon, I think they were pretty happy with that commitment. Probably, I wouldn't say they ever backed off Lincoln Cure, but we're pretty comfortable with what the tight ends they had coming in. With Deshaun Brown flipping back to Tennessee, I would expect Oregon to kind of turn up the heat on Lincoln Cure. We just saw Kansas State go on the road to BYU and get the doors blown off. Look, when you look at this Oregon offense, specifically the tight ends, how they're using a guy like Kenny Sadiq, how Terrence Ferguson is a central part in this Oregon offense. There's not a ton of offenses that can sell to elite pass catching tight ends that you're going to be a centerpiece in the offense. I think Oregon is one of those programs. You look at Lincoln Cure, 6'6", 220, runs an 11-second 100-meter dash. One of the more special tight ends we see in the 2025 class, and quite frankly, one of the more special tight ends we've seen coming out in quite a long time. We'll see if Oregon can get this one done. It's pretty obvious that Oregon has a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail. This is a program that a lot of players want to go play for. And I think it's only going to get stronger as Oregon continues to win games. I think they'll put out probably 12 to 15 players to the NFL draft at the end of the year. That certainly becomes a selling point. Dan Lanning's got this thing cooking. Obviously, it seems like they're figuring it out on the football field from what we saw against Oregon State. They're continuing the momentum on the recruiting trail. We talk about this all the time. If you can win on the football field, you want to parlay that momentum on the recruiting trail. There ain't many programs that are doing better on that than this Oregon program. We'll close it out there. Douglas Utu, just a blue chipper, a guy that I think is going to be a multi-year starter for this Oregon Ducks program. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all